Hi, I'm Ashura, and welcome to my story-focused playthrough of not only the classic Scythe of Elune quest chain, but also the Legion artifact acquisition quest chain for, you guessed it, the Scythe of Elune. Basically, this is a comprehensive lore video about the Scythe of Elune, but instead of just telling you about the artifact, which I technically will still be doing anyway, I'm going to take you through most of the in-game quests that cover it, so you can get all of the lore direct from the source without having to go through it yourself. But before we jump into the quests, first we have to talk about the origins of the Scythe of Elune. Now, the first bit of lore we ever got on the Scythe of Elune was this vanilla quest chain, but it wasn't actually until Cataclysm and the Curse of the Worgen comic that we learned about the origins of the Scythe of Elune, or even the origins of the Worgen. So what I'm telling you first is information we got later, and therefore, technically, a retcon. But in the interest of setting up context for the classic quest chain that we're about to go through, and just general lore about the Scythe of Elune, I figured we should start at the very beginning. So, the Scythe of Elune was created a little over 9,000 years ago during a conflict known as the War of the Satyr, which was a very deadly war between the Night Elves and the Satyr in Ashenvale Forest. Basically, the demons and Satyr who'd survived from the War of the Ancients 700 years prior decided to enact their revenge on the Night Elves and get rid of them once and for all. Now, also at this time, the early Night Elf druids were experimenting with different forms and shapeshifts. And most druid shapeshifts, though not all, come from the wild gods, so they decided to channel from a wild god that they had never done before, Guldrin, the wolf wild god. Guldrin has actually showed up quite a few times in-game, I think the most recent of which was in Emerald Dream content, but he's also been in the Worgen Heritage quest, and you might remember him the most from Cataclysm Hyjal content. Varian Rin is also actually the champion of Guldrin, though that is not largely relevant to Scythe of Elune lore. So, Guldrin is the wild god of rage and bloodlust and ferocity and unyielding will. And so when the Night Elf druids channeled him, they transformed into what is now known as Worgen. Well, technically, if we're being picky, the original form they took on was much more like a wolf. It wasn't until the Scythe of Elune was created and used on them that pack form started to resemble the Worgen. But that's for later. Anywho, because of Guldrin's ferocity and bloodlust, unfortunately, when the Night Elf druids channeled this pack form, they basically lost themselves. They became totally feral creatures who could hardly distinguish between a friend or foe. Pretty much every time one of the druids would transform into pack form, they would attack both their enemies and their allies. There were sentinels who lost their lives because the pack druids could not control themselves. And so Malfurion outlawed the pack form and decreed that no druid could ever use that shapeshift ever again. But the problem is, when you're in a war fighting for your life, you're going to do pretty much anything you can to ensure not only your own survival, but that you win that war. And so there was a sizable faction of pack druids who disagreed with Malfurion and thought that they should channel pack form no matter the cost to ensure that the Night Elves won this very deadly, very close war. Now, there's 3 Night Elves that are really important to talk about in this conflict. There's Belisra Starbreeze, a priestess of the moon, her lover, Arvel, who's a druid, and Arvel's best friend, R'hllor Fangfire, who is also a druid. And both R'hllor Fangfire and Arvel had channeled the pack form in the past, on numerous occasions to save themselves. But when Malfurion outlawed the form, while Arvel agreed with him, R'hllor Fangfire vehemently disagreed. And unfortunately, that meant that when Arvel was put in a situation where his life was at risk and he had to choose between using pack form or dying, he died. He did not want to betray Malfurion and use pack form even to save his own life. And this greatly upset his lover Belisra and R'hllor Fangfire. So Belisra and R'hllor teamed up and created what was first known as the Staff of Elune. Belisra, as a priestess of the moon, was able to enchant a staff and infuse it with the power of Elune, the moon goddess. And then R'hllor and the Druids of the Pack brought to her a fang of Goldrin that they then put on the staff and transformed it into the Scythe of Elune. Belisra hoped that with the Scythe of Elune, they could tame the ferocity of the Worgen, that it wouldn't have to be an outlawed form anymore, and that they could use it to win the war against the Satyr. But the Scythe of Elune didn't quite have this effect on the Worgen. Actually, it's a little unclear what effect it did have, but one of the biggest unintended consequences of the creation of the Scythe of Elune is that it basically created the Worgen curse. You may be familiar with the fact that the Worgen curse is spread through bite. Any Worgen who bites another will also transform them into a Worgen. So at this point during the War of the Satyr, after the Scythe of Elune was used on all of the pack druids, when they bit other night elves, they realized that they could turn them into Worgen without them even having to be druids. But then those bitten night elves would also give in to the ferocity of the Worgen form. This got to such a point where the night elves were fighting a war on two fronts against both the demons of the Burning Legion and also the Worgen, who still could not distinguish between friend or foe and were taking out sentinels left and right. And so Belisra, horrified by what she'd done, went to Malfurion, and together they concocted a plan. The Scythe of Elune is connected to Goldrin, and through Goldrin, the Emerald Dream. So they figured that they could use the Scythe of Elune to send the Worgen into the Emerald Dream. But more than that, there's a specific tree in the Emerald Dream called Doral Nir, known for having a soothing effect on any creatures within its vicinity in the Emerald Dream. And so Malfurion figured not only could they send the Worgen to the Emerald Dream, they could send them to this specific tree in the hopes that it would soothe their bloodlust and calm them down. And after a little bit of backhanded betrayal on both sides, this is successfully achieved. Belisra and Malfurion are able to transport the Worgen into the Emerald Dream under Doral Nir, where they slumber for pretty much the next 10,000 years. I should also say, because it will be important later on, R'hllor Fangfire had basically completely given in to the pack form and became the alpha of the Worgen, and so when Belisra and Malfurion send them into the Emerald Dream, R'hllor Fangfire goes with them. So we don't see or hear from the Worgen for 9,000 years until Vanilla WoW. And that brings us to the Vanilla Scythe of Elune quest chain. So let's get into it. Though we've put many resources and much effort into driving the remaining demons from the Fellwood to the north, our successes have been few. We've been able to keep much of the demonic presence from Ashenvale. To the north, near the Fellwood border, the ruined shrine of Malthandris has been overtaken by mysterious wolfmen. Their chilling calls have led the area to be known as the Howling Vale. The Tome of Malthandris kept at the shrine may shed some light on why these wolfmen have come.
Goddess, watch over you.
The Shrine of Malthandris. May the light of Elune shine upon this vale eternal, and illuminate the ways of the forest as it has for time immemorial. The numbers of my companions dwindles, Goddess, and my own power shall soon be insufficient to hold back the demons of Fellwood. Goddess, grant me the power to overcome my enemies. Hear me, please. My need is desperate and my cause is just. What? What is this? Could this be the answer to my prayers? Elune has granted me a weapon, this scythe, to defeat the demons. A little fun fact. This scene where Valinda gets her hands on the Scythe of Elune is also depicted in the epilogue of the Curse of the Worgen comic. And in it, we learn that Melthandris, for whom the shrine is named, was actually her aunt, and that during the later part of the War of the Satyr, it was Melthandris who was entrusted with the care of the Scythe of Elune. But then Melthandris died in the final battle of the War of the Satyr, and then it's said in the comic that Valinda's mother, Melthandris' sister, built the Shrine of Melthandris and presumably put the Scythe of Elune in it. And then 9,000 years later, Valinda Starsong came across it.
I am honored.
The Tome of Melthandris works in strange ways. The events it records, the events it shows. No one truly understands why it does what it does. Nonetheless, it is clear that what Priestess Starsong received, this Scythe of Elune, bears further investigation.
Good luck, friend.
Valinda Starsong was my predecessor here in Ashenvale Forest. At first it seemed she had the situation in Fellwood under control, but little by little her efforts faltered. One day she simply disappeared. I was sent here to continue her work. I am afraid I know nothing of the priestess, however. Perhaps Thintel Bladeweaver, one of the commanders of the Sentinels, knows further details of her disappearance that I was not a party to. Surely she will understand the import of such information.
Farewell. How may I help?
Valinda Starsong? That the priestess disappeared some time ago is almost certainly common knowledge. As to further details about the events that surrounded her departure, it would take good reason for me to divulge such information.
Del Nadris.
The Tome of Melthandris showed you this? I suppose there would be little harm in allowing you to examine her belongings. This key will allow you to open the chest where we stored her things in the Sentinel's bunkhouse. She kept a journal of her duties. If there's anything to be learned, it will be from that. I should tell you, the Sentinels believe that she had her own reasons for leaving and expect that she could return at any time. The priestess has done much in the past to earn our trust.
Be careful. Hello.
Valinda's journal. Elune has granted my wishes. The lives of my fallen comrades will not be in vain, and I shall avenge their deaths using the Scythe of Elune. It is an ancient thing. A branch, twisted and gnarled of wood that could be older than even the Kaldori. For many hours I examined the tool that the goddess granted to me. It is no ordinary weapon, that is for certain, nor is it a simple magical implement. With it, it is as though the barriers of time and space are weakened. Holding the scythe in my hands, I received a vision of chaos. Wolfmen, the Worgen, battled an incredible enemy. The Worgen fought savagely, as fit their primitive race. But their enemy was unflinching, the Lords of the Emerald Flame. And that was when I realized the true power of the scythe. By focusing on it, I became able to communicate with the Worgen. It was not speech I used to contact them, however. It was something different. I could not describe it. What mattered was that the Worgen heard and understood me. By further channeling energy into the scythe, the barriers weakened more, and I was able to draw Worgen into our world. 150 I was able to summon in my first attempt. They followed me into battle, and with their brutish strength at my command, we tore into the demons of Fellwood. Elune has granted my wishes. The forest will be cleansed. May Elune's blessings be upon me until my work is done. If it wasn't already obvious, I do want to say the vision she has is of the War of the Satyr, and when she refers to the barriers of time and space being weakened, she is summoning the Worgen from where they are in the Emerald Dream. All goes well. I've summoned larger numbers of Worgen to fight at my side. Though they are of simple mind, they have shown impressive ability to coordinate their attacks and function as a group. I have identified leaders in their packs. To them, I've given command of small groups of warriors. We strike from many places in the forest at once, and my campaign against the demons is a fruitful one. May Elune's blessings be upon me until my work is done. A pack is lost. I sent the Worgen to range through the forest and identify areas of demonic infestation, but they did not return. I begin to worry about the leaders that I've entrusted control to. They are of simple mind, and this small bit of authority I've given to them, they stretched to the utmost. Am I losing control? Perhaps I shall cease summoning additional Worgen for the time being. May Elune's blessings be upon me until my work is done. Though I have not summoned additional Worgen, their numbers continue to increase. It is as though the Scythe no longer requires my intervention for the summoning process. This is troubling. I've gathered as many of the packs as I could find and ordered them to remain at the Shrine of Milthandris. Meanwhile, I've searched the libraries in Darnassus and consulted with the Circle of Ancients in Darkshore. Not one scrap of information about these Worgen did I find. I have heard reports, whispers, of a wizard of the Kirin Tor named Erigol. From what I've heard, it is possible that he has also summoned Worgen. I would consult with this wizard, distasteful as it may be, and see what he knows. The Worgen are dangerous, and I wish to stem the tide. On the morrow, I will travel to the port in the Barrens and book passage to the New World. May Elune's blessings be upon me until my work is done. So obviously at this point when she says that their numbers continue to increase, that is the Worgen spreading the curse. They are biting more people and creating more Worgen. I do want to talk about the Erigol thing though, because I had forgotten until I was doing research for this, that he did also summon Worgen, but he did it without the Scythe of Elune. And he does it not dissimilarly. He basically gets his hands on a journal of a mage who talks about the Worgen and talks about how they're in another dimension completely. And Erigol's basically able to figure it out from that journal and does himself succeed in summoning the Worgen from the Emerald Dream. Now, this is more relevant to Cataclysm and Gilneas stuff, but I do want to bring it up. Earlier, I had mentioned R'hllor Fangfire, and he actually ends up being part of the Worgen that Erigol summons. So at this point, R'hllor is in Silverpine / Gilneas.
What brings you here?
What'd you find out?
Be careful.
It seems that Valinda's disappearance is more troubling than it originally appeared. Even still, I cannot believe that she's come to a bad end. Perhaps it would be beneficial for us to make contact with her. Since you've shown a vested interest in this matter, I would like to enlist your aid.
Good luck, friend.
Ratchet is the only port in the Barrens. Most likely Valinda found a trading vessel in Ratchet to take her to Blackwater Cove in Azeroth. We've had limited dealings with the goblins that run the port, but the master of the dock should have information about the comings and goings of ship passengers. Follow the road southeast through Ashenvale, and you'll find yourself in the Barrens. Watch your step. Warriors of the Horde patrol the land. You will be safe at the port, though.
Goddess watch over you.
What's up? Keep it real.
Night Elf, huh? Must admit, we don't get much of your type out here. Looking for someone, huh? Just give me a moment. I'm sure I have it written in one of my ledgers. A lot of people travel through here, though, so just give me a moment.
Have a good one.
Ah, yes. Finally found it. Should have told me she passed through here that long ago. Let's see. Valinda. Booked passage to Booty Bay on the Black Osprey. I don't have anything here saying otherwise, so I'd assume it arrived in port safely. Not much more help I can be to you, but She asked about overland travel over on that side of the world, and I mentioned Ruzgot, a caravan driver based out of Booty Bay. Might be that this Valinda traveled with him. Move along now. I have an all day for you.
Be good. Talk to me.
Yes? Now, it doesn't look to me like you're the sort with goods that need shipping, so either you're looking for a job with my caravan, and there's no jobs to be had now, or you're probably talking to the wrong goblin. So which one is it?
Glad I could help.
Turns out I was wrong about you, and that isn't something that happens every day. It just so happens that I remember this Valinda you're looking for. Isn't every day that a night elf priest is that wants to travel with a dirty old but great for your shipping needs caravan like your own. We split up on the way north. She was headed for Darkshire. The clerk there keeps all sorts of records. Might know something useful. Be careful in the jungle. It is a deadly place even at the best of times. I sort of like randomly, just smallest detail ever, how he's like a Blackwater goblin and has a caravan that's great for shipping needs. Like, just thinking about Undermine and the Blackwater cartel. It lines up so well.
What can I do for you?
With all the strange happenings of the last few years, I keep as good records of strangers as I can. Never know when it might come in handy. Though it's usually not pleasant business when it does. Not to suggest anything about this Valinda you're looking for. Oh my god, I feel like that's a reference to the to the Stalvin Mismantle stuff. Oh my god, not me mentioning his brother. Because you talk to him during the Stalvin Mismantle quests and get records on him.
Have a good one.
No, I don't have any records of a Valinda Starsong staying in Darkshire. Though, if you don't mind me saying, I can hardly imagine a Night Elf priest is taking a room in the inn, if you get my meaning. These wolfmen you mentioned, though, that's something I've heard about. Just the other day, Calor came into town with a string of their heads. He works with the Caravan family. Hunters of demons, undead, and other monstrosities. Speak with Jonathan. He's the head of the household.
Safe travels.
What can I do for you?
Dark times these are. Ill news is whispered from every swaying branch, and evil can be found under every rock. And in such times an unknown stranger enters my home and asks of Worgen. I'll ask no forgiveness for my suspicions, only answers. And answers I will have.
Be careful.
Your story rings true. I do not entirely understand your motives, but if your business here in Duskwood involves ridding the forest of Worgen in any number, then I can forgo understanding for results. There's a mine to the south that has been overrun with Worgen. They appeared out of nowhere, but from what we know, that is where they first were found. Go about your business, but I would ask that if you find anything of import, you share it with me. We will accept any aid in our war against evil.
Have a good one.
It's interesting thinking about how the Worgen here and in Ashenvale are most likely to be Night Elves. Like, these are Night Elf Worgen. Either because they're the original druids, or they're like Night Elves that were bitten and infected with the Worgen curse during the War of the Cedar. Because these are all Worgen that were summoned using the Scythe of Elune, right? And so for the most part, like, I'm sure that some of these are also probably humans in Duskwood that were bitten and infected. But, like, they're Night Elves. They're Night Elves. I've failed. I've failed in my duty. Failed my people. The Worgen run rampant, and the scythe of my goddess is lost. This evil I have unleashed. In whose hand does the power my goddess granted to me now lie? By whose hand is it directed?
You need something?
It is an interesting story you tell. Though the Caravan family's influence is not large enough that we might find the root of these troubles and finish them once and for all, we will do what we can to contain the Worgen's numbers in Duskwood. Already I've instructed Calor to make this his first priority.
For the Alliance.
We shall rein in the Worgen problem. Have no worry of that. This evil that your friend introduced to our woods will be contained, and I bear her no ill will for her actions. Strange events are afoot in these times, and the darkness knows no respite. I'll keep you no longer. I suspect that there are others that should hear of what you found in the mines of Duskwood.
See you later.
So I just want to point out that apparition of Valinda we saw in the mine was actually her ghost. She died after making it to Duskwood. Pretty much what happened. You remember that I said R'hllor Fangfire was a part of the Silver Pine Worgen under Aragorn? Well, when Valinda started her expedition to meet Aragorn in the hopes that he would help her understand the Worgen better, R'hllor and his Worgen caught wind of the fact that she possessed the Scythe of Elune, the very thing used to trap them in the Emerald Dream in the first place. And R'hllor really wanted the Scythe, partially so it couldn't be used against them again, but also partially so he could summon more of his Worgen comrades from the Emerald Dream. But there were also other Worgen under R'hllor who wanted to get the Scythe of Elune first to use it against him. And so they traveled to Duskwood to intercept her and cornered her in the Roland's Doom mine. But unfortunately, Valinda and these Worgen would all get caught up in a dynamite explosion and die. We then learn in classic Duskwood quests that the Scythe of Elune next passes into the hands of Jitters. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about that after we turn in this last quest.
Hello.
So this is the fate of Valinda, is it? The High Priestess will be disappointed to hear of this. They were good friends before her disappearance. Still, the Scythe of Elune was surely granted to her as a boon by our goddess, and it is unsettling to me that it has fallen out of her servant's hands. Another matter for another time, however. I owe you my thanks in no small amount for what you've accomplished.
Farewell.
So after Valinda's untimely demise, the Scythe of Elune gets left in the mine at Roland's Doom in Duskwood, where eventually it is discovered by a man named Jitters, who you may remember is a hermit that wanders around Raven Hill. There's a series of classic Duskwood quests that sort of tell this story, but actually much of the lore is covered in Jitters' journal, so since this is an in-depth video on the Scythe of Elune, I figured that I would read most of it, not all of it, because it's actually really pretty long, but most of it out loud. It began with the finding of that cursed scythe in the mine they call Roland's Doom. Yes, that was the start of it. Before that, the Defia's Brotherhood was happy with our progress in Duskwood. Before the scythe, the terrors of this place seemed as tame as Northshire Valley. But ever since I found the haft of the scythe jutting from that pile of rubble in the mine and, curse me, pulled it free, Roland's Doom became a place of vile death. If I had known what would happen, I would have cut off my own hand to keep from grasping that rune-carved wood. So many regrets. I always thought that was a privilege of the old. I now know that it is not the old, it is the hopeless who don the mantle of regret, unable and unwilling to shrug it from shoulders stooped with misery. But enough waxing like a pipe-mad poet. I must continue with the chronicle. After the scythe was freed, a change rippled through the mine. Light from our flickering torches warped, and the strength of our voices seemed beyond our control. Sometimes a man's whisper roared through the tunnels, forcing hands on ears, and sometimes our shouts barely traveled a few steps before diminishing into a hint on the wind. Unnerving, yes, but we did not have long to wonder at the strangeness. It was but a harbinger of what truly drove us from the mine. The Worgen. They came at us from everywhere, clawing from hidden holes at our feet and dropping upon us from silent perches above. Half our men fell in those first panicked minutes. The rest, including myself, tried to flee. As I ran, I saw so many of my brothers taken by tooth and claw, heard so many screams cut short or gurgled to silence. For all I know, I am the only human to escape that place. I can only guess why I survived that night. I have always been cautious, always quick to flinch from jabs and leap free of pitfalls. My nickname, Jitters, comes from this trait, so perhaps it was just that knack for caution that saved me. Or maybe it was the scythe they pulled from the rubble. It cannot be the scythe itself, for I lost it during my frantic flight. But if it was I who brought the Worgen to Duskwood, then perhaps the Worgen afforded me a rare courtesy. Curse them. Or perhaps I am doomed to witness the change I wrought on Duskwood. Perhaps it is my fate to watch as the Worgen tear into this land, staining it even darker with their foulness. If that truly is my fate, then it is twofold. For the Worgen are not the only power to clutch at Duskwood. The fiends from Deadwind Pass have also staked claim. That is the next chapter of my tale, and I pray it is the last. After surviving the flight from Roland's Doom, I hid within a barn owned by a man named Sven. I spent a few days in the barn, and such horror lingered with me that I never once made myself known to Sven or his family. But from what I saw from my hiding place, I knew these farmers were quite decent folk. Had I stepped from my concealment, I think they would have taken me in. But trust is hard for me. Harder still after that shock in the mine. So I remained hidden, and it saved my life. A few days after I arrived at the barn, Sven left his farm for Darkshire. He kissed his wife and smiled to his children and promised to return soon with toys and sweets. The poor man. That was the last time he saw his family unmutilated. At least they parted happily. And at least his wife was the first to die, and was freed from seeing the slaughter of her children. But these small graces do nothing for me. I saw what happened, and it will ever haunt my dreams. My hand trembles as I recall the details of that night, when Sven was away and his family was doomed to face the Black Riders alone. Again, regret claws at me, for I was there and could have risen against those fiends from Deadwind Pass. But it is a false regret. It is the same that plagues any survivor of a tragedy. I know that. Had I left my place of hiding, I too would have been killed, my body ripped and torn, and its pieces spread so widely that I would not be recognized. But even though I know I could have done nothing to stop this heinous murder, one true regret does remain. I brought the Black Riders to Sven's farm. My discovery of the Scythe not only unleashed the Worgen upon Duskwood, it drew the Riders from Deadwind Pass. I know this because just before they began their slaughter, they asked one question to Sven's wife as she held her children close, giving them what comfort she could, though she was certain death was near. "The Scythe of Elune," one of the riders shrieked in a voice both harsh and shrill, like the grinding of an axe on stone. And the last word, Elune, it croaked as if choking on the sound. Dread gripped me when I heard that voice, both from the horrid sound of it and because I knew the scythe of which the rider spoke. It must be the same cursed thing I drew from the rocks of Roland's Doom days before. It was what the Black Riders sought, and it was what would kill Sven's family. So, long story short, the Dark Riders do in fact kill Sven's family. And I want to point out on the last page, Jitter said, "I spent the next few weeks moving from place to place, never lingering for fear of the Riders. I'm now in the abandoned town of Raven's Hill, as always, hiding. I cannot face whatever power they used against Sven's wife. and I know it searches Duskwood even still for the Scythe. It has lost me, and I thank the light for this, for had I kept it, I know I would have been found. Even now, I know in my heart that I will be found. I'm so tired. And this brings us to the next part of the story of the Scythe of Elune, which happens in the Dark Riders comic. Because, as Jitters just told us, the Dark Riders are still searching for the Scythe of Elune. Now, I want to point out, I'm not sure exactly when this comic is supposed to take place. I assume it's at some point between Vanilla and Cataclysm, because the events at the end of the comic segue pretty directly into what happens with the Scythe of Elune during Cataclysm. But I don't know if that means it happens during Wrath of the Lich King, or if it happens at the same time as / sort of after the events of the vanilla WoW Duskwood quests. So in this comic, after Jitters accidentally loses the Worgen upon Duskwood, they find the Scythe of Elune and take it with them. And they start expanding their wolf cult and spreading the Worgen curse to the hapless citizens of Duskwood. In comes a man named Revelcost and his companions. Now, there's specific reasons that they end up getting involved with this that are a little bit complicated and I think confusing to get into, so I'm not going to mention that. But basically, Revelcost and his companions come across the Worgen and end up killing them. And after killing them, Revelcost takes the Scythe of Elune. But we learned from the Jitter stuff in Vanilla Duskwood that the Scythe of Elune is being hunted down by the Dark Riders of Karazhan. Now, I do want to say that we're going to learn the origin lore behind the Dark Riders in the Legion acquisition quest for the Scythe of Elune, but that lore actually comes from this comic. So it's a little bit of a spoiler, but for the sake of context, I'm just going to give it to you. So the Dark Riders were a group of human merchants who came across Medivh in Karazhan and tried to cheat him by selling him counterfeit artifacts. And Medivh, who was possessed by Sargeras at the time, well, let's just say he didn't appreciate that. And so he cursed them, transformed them into the Dark Riders, and pretty much forced them to hunt down artifacts for him in perpetuity. And so at this point, between the Duskwood quests and the Dark Riders comic, the Dark Riders have been searching for the Scythe of Elune for quite some time. And part of the reason that Revelcost and his companions get involved is because they have also ran into the Dark Riders when the Dark Riders were searching for other artifacts. But basically, Revelcost and his companions use the Scythe of Elune as bait to draw out the Dark Riders. And long story short, they deal with them, are able to secure a few artifacts, and then at the end of this comic, plan to give those artifacts back to their rightful owners. One of which is the Scythe of Elune, because Revelcost has had it this whole time since he picked it up from the Worgen. So he passes it off to a gnome from the SI7, who then says he's going to give it to a night elf. And that night elf ends up being Valorn Stillbow. And this is where we get the events of Cataclysm and the Curse of the Worgen comic. So Valorn sneaks into Gilneas through a series of underground tunnels and meets up with Belisra Starbreeze, who, if you remember from the beginning of this video, is the original creator of the Scythe of Elune. And she's been in Gilneas dealing with the encroaching Worgen. So Belisra at this point has the Scythe of Elune, and she and her companions move it around so the Forsaken can't get their hands on it. And in-game, during the Worgen leveling experience, unfortunately, the Forsaken are able to get their hands on it, and you as the player character go through a quest where you retrieve the Scythe of Elune and then take it back to Belisra. And that's when she performs the ritual on the Worgen and the player character that brings them into balance, that soothes their rage, sort of gives them back some of their humanity. And that's actually the quest that you learn your shapeshift ability from that allows you to go back and forth between human form and Worgen form. So between the Curse of the Worgen comic and the Worgen starting zone, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens, but basically after that, Belisra tries to use the Scythe of Elune against R'hllor and the Worgen. He almost gets it from her, but then he gets killed, and that's pretty much it. After everything is wrapped up with the Cataclysm Worgen plot, Belisra takes the Scythe of Elune back, and we learn in the Legion artifact text that she then takes the Scythe of Elune to Duskwood with Valoran to see if it can perhaps be used further in study of the Worgen. But I also think the setup for the Legion artifact acquisition quest is that it's been sort of under like Night Elf jurisdiction in Darnassus. But considering that quite a few years passed between Cataclysm and Legion, I expect that both of these things are true, that she took it to Duskwood, but that also it's probably been in Darnassus. All that aside, this is then what brings us to the Legion artifact acquisition quest chain for the Scythe of Elune. So let's get into that.
We are nature's guardians.
Held for safekeeping by Tyrande, the High Priestess of Elune, the Scythe of Elune carries a long and unsettling history for druids. Tied to the origin of the Worgen on Azeroth, the Scythe is said to possess untold lunar power for the druid with balance enough to keep control. We need only to convince Tyrande's people that you are worthy to keep it safe in the battles to come.
Go with Cenarius's blessing. Walk in peace.
Excellent choice. With the power of that weapon in your hands, we will be able to bring balance back to Azeroth.
May your trail...
Ilunadore, I must speak with you at once. My life for Kalimdor.
I've received word that Tyrande herself has authorized the release of a great artifact, the Scythe of Elune, to aid our cause. Valoran Stillbow has agreed to give up the weapon, which she has kept as part of an investigation into the cursed Worgen of Duskwood. I believe that you, champion, will be our best hope at wielding its power without succumbing to the animal rage that ebbs within. You must go to Duskwood and take up the scythe against our foes. So remember that Valoran was not only the person who snuck into Gilneas to give the Scythe of Elune to Belisra in early Cataclysm, but also he was the person, as it says in this quest, that accompanied Belisra to Duskwood after the end of Cataclysm to continue studying the Worgen. And also, I just have to say, I like that it's Neralex who gives you this quest, because he is actually in the Curse of the Worgen comic when Malfurion and the other druids of the Cenarian Circle are talking about the druids of the pack.
Follow me. The Dream Grove has its own gate to the Dreamway. Through it, you can travel to the far corners of Azeroth.
Our champion arrives. We have been sent by Tyrande, bearing a weapon that may turn the tide of this war. You must take up the Scythe of Elune, champion. May its power serve you well.
Well met, champion. Are you ready for the burden you must bear? Though it goes against my better judgment, it is Tyrande's wish that the Scythe of Elune be brandished once more against the new Legion threat. It is a small comfort to see it wielded by a keeper of the balance such as yourself. Know that the last time the scythe was wielded, it resulted in great calamity. You must be vigilant to contain the bestial wrath that ebbs within. With those words in your heart, take the scythe and bring its fury against our foes. May the light of Elune protect you. I do find it sort of ironic that with one exception, pretty much every time the Scythe of Elune comes up and is used in the story, it's against the Burning Legion. Like, that's sort of why it got created in the War of the Satyr. That's why Valinda discovered it in Ashenvale when she was looking for something to use against the demons in Felwood. And it feels so apt that it should then come up again when the Burning Legion are back in Legion.
The scythe belongs to Karazhan, worm.
Valorn, no!
So, remember
He's
that
gone.
the Dark Riders have been searching for the Scythe of Elune pretty much since, like, before Vanilla WoW? Yeah. Lorne, that was a Dark Rider. But how did they reach us here under the protection of the Grove? I cannot believe the Dark Riders found us here. Long have they hunted the Scythe to sate their lust for the artifacts of Azeroth. We thought we would be protected within the Grove. And now, Valorn is gone. You must become the Hunter. Seek the Dark Riders and recover the Scythe. We last encountered them near Manor Mistmantle in Duskwood. Start your search there. And bring justice to Valorn. The Rider must pay.
First the Nightbane are driven mad, and now a druid comes to investigate Manor Mistmantle. This can only mean the Scythe of Elune has returned to Duskwood, and the Dark Riders cannot be far behind. Tell me what you seek, druid, and I may be of assistance.
So, you're gonna learn pretty quickly that the whole entire Legion artifact acquisition questline for the Scythe of Elune is pretty much a callback to the Dark Riders comic. And I actually really like that the first place you go in this quest chain is Manor Mistmantle, because one of the first places that Revel Cost and his companions go in the Dark Riders comic to investigate the Worgen and the Wolf Cult is Manor Mistmantle.
What do you need?
So I was correct, and the Scythe is your quarry. Know that in order to retrieve it, we must do what no denizen of Duskwood has ever attempted. We must hunt the Dark Riders. I've been tracking them for some time since my encounter with them while hunting down the Wolf Cult. They are a blight upon these lands, and they hold no right to the artifacts they hoard. If we wish to recover this artifact, we will need to find their lair. Fortunately, I may just have the clue we need. So I guess this means that pretty much between whenever this takes place, if that's Wrath of the Lich King or Vanilla, and Legion, he's been hunting down and investigating the Dark Riders. That's a lot of years.
The light redeems.
In my previous confrontation with your foe, I was able to see a glimpse into their past. Granted blessed vision by the Cloak of Purity, I saw the Dark Riders for who they once were. Come, we must go to Eridan's camp in Deadwind Pass. I can explain its significance along the way. That references another scene in the comic. So the Cloak of Purity is an artifact that blesses its wearer and keeps them safe from corruption, but also allows them to see through illusions. And when Revel Cost and his companions end up in Karazhan and fight the Dark Riders, he discovers the Cloak of Purity in their stash of artifacts, which I think he's actually been searching for it for some time, so when he gets sent to Karazhan, he knows to look for it. And he grabs it and puts it on because Karazhan is so full of just bad magic. Like, it is super corruptive, and there are so many illusions there that are messing with him and his companions. And so when he puts the cloak on and he's fighting the Dark Riders, he sort of sees through the illusion that they're wearing and discovers their true identities. And that's how he figures out, as he will very shortly tell us, that they're just a group of merchants who wronged Medivh.
It seems you've been followed. Dark Riders! The Dark Riders were not always like this. They were once a group of traveling merchants. Unfortunately, they crossed the sorcerer Medivh, who cursed them to an eternity of hunting artifacts for him. Look out behind you! Eridan was the first of the Dark Riders, and I believe he leads them now. His camp is still in Deadwind Pass, strangely untouched after all these years. If my convictions are correct, the key to finding the Dark Riders, as well as the artifacts they still covet, can be found there. Riders on our flank! Be ready! What do you need?
It's strange that the Dark Riders haven't followed us here, but I'll take whatever boon I can get. I believe the key to finding the Dark Riders is here somewhere. Let us begin our search.
I and the Light's vengeance.
This place is where the merchant Eridan set up camp while he was trying to ply his dubious wares to the sorcerer Medivh. It has remained strangely untouched for all this time, which leads me to believe it may still have a connection to its former owner. Help me search the camp. Let's see if we can find something to lead us to the Dark Riders. The box contains various magical-looking trinkets and baubles. Upon close inspection, these relics appear to be nothing more than clever forgeries. That being a reference to the fact that when they tried to sell artifacts to Medivh, they were fake ones. I didn't know any of this the first time I went through this, so now I'm really glad I have the context of this comic. These boots are in surprisingly nice condition for their age. It's odd that they would still be left here after all these years. The compass is old and weathered with use. It appears to be malfunctioning. The compass arrow is erratically changing direction and never settling at true north. The bedding in the tent has been undisturbed for quite some time.
Fool! You will suffer for your trespass. Turn away now, interloper. The horrors of the past will be your undoing.
Dark energy hums from the journal, which appears to be the writings of Eridan, and chronicles his time in the Deadwind Pass. One entry in particular stands out. The Nightbane have become restless of late, and whispers abound that the Scythe of Elune have left Darnassus. It must be coming nearer, for the Worgen are constantly drawn to it. They will lead me to it. Those cursed night elves think the weapon is safe in their care. They will soon find how wrong they are. The Nightbane specifically are the group of Worgen from Duskwood, I believe.
How can the light serve?
A Nightbane! If they're in Deadwind Pass, then they may be seeking the Scythe as well. Let's split up and try to track them down. We'll see where their trail leads.
The light redeems. The Worgen led you here as well. This must be where the scythe is kept.
The Worgen appear to be drawn to the catacombs beneath Karazhan. Could it be?
I and the light's vengeance.
The sewer grate leads to the catacombs underneath Karazhan. I've never paid it much attention, but it seems to be where the Nightbane are being drawn to. To think, the Dark Riders may have been under our noses this entire time. Come, let us see where this leads.
The light. Go in ahead, Druid. I will join you inside.
Do not think you have won. Conservator, do your duty.
This is actually sort of a fun reference to the comic too, because when they open up the artifact vault in Karazhan, I don't know if it's the curator or if it is the conservator, but one of these, like, mech-type dudes comes out and attacks them.
So this is what you're after. The artifacts of Karazhan belong here. And I will not allow them to be taken away! If you want the Scythe, Druid, come and claim it! You are a persistent one. Face the fury of the beast. I will ride again.
It is done. The Dark Riders are defeated. Now I can reclaim these stolen artifacts and return them to their rightful owners. You have proven an unexpected ally. The weapon is yours. Let us hope it can turn the tide in this war. The Dark Riders lost this battle, but I fear they will soon regroup. We had best be gone before they do.
For the most part, this quest chain is sort of a sequel to the Dark Riders comic all those years later, but it's funny that it ends in a very similar way, because at the end of the Dark Riders comic, they also plan to take the artifacts they found in Karazhan and return them to the rightful owners, and like the same exact thing is happening here.
What do you need?
Today was a great blow against the Dark Riders and a victory for the people of Duskwood. They are in your debt, as am I.
I am the Light's vengeance.
Your assistance against the Dark Riders has proven a great service to the Light. Though our beliefs may separate us, I know that we share one goal. You've allowed me to fill my purpose in returning these artifacts to their rightful owners, and for this I am thankful. As for the Scythe of Elune, I can think of no safer place than in your care. May it serve you well against the Legion.
Go with the light.
What do you ask?
The Scythe of Elune! I never thought I would see that weapon used without turning its wielder into a savage beast, but you've brought balance to its primal nature. Elune has certainly guided your hand. You've accomplished what no druid has done before.
Walk in peace.
And that
trail
is the complete story of the Scythe of Elune. Now that it's in the player character's hands, there's not really a lot else that comes in the future for this weapon, other than when all of the artifacts are used and drained to deal with Sargeras' sword, so to speak. Actually, there's one more interesting thing I want to say about the Scythe in Legion. There are feral Worgen in Val'sharah that you can use the Scythe on to turn them back into Night Elves. But not all of them. Some feral Worgen you actually can't use the Scythe on, which is fascinating to me, because when Belisra first used the Scythe on the Druids of the Pack, it seemed to only make them angrier, more feral. But we did learn in the Gilnean leveling experience that the Scythe was partially responsible for bringing the newly cursed Gilnean Worgen into balance with themselves. There's a lot of possible speculation to be had here, especially since we don't know that much about the nature of the curse, and why it even came from the creation of the Scythe of Elune. But I'll leave it at that for now. But that's pretty much it. So thank you for joining me for the lore and story of the Scythe of Elune, and I hope to see you for whatever comes next. Hi, I'm Ashura, and welcome to my story What? This is awkward. I turned too early. What if I just... This is a terrible idea, actually. We learned about the origins of the Scythe of the I quit. That we learned about the origin. I hate this. Can I go around? Can I go around? Free me, please. 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 This is the worst. This is gonna be so awkward to edit.